out there. Welcome back to the Mentor Roulette grind. This time is slightly different, as originally this set of Mentor Roulette were done live. For this reason, the chat log is hidden with my amazing face and hoodie, and names are shortened to initials. Another difference is that we randomly choose jobs with the Wheel of Jobs for every duty instead of for the entire set. An interesting extra twist to this is that throughout the stream, a group hanging out here in my yard is actively trying to yoink me specifically into a hard extreme. Now, with all that said, for duty 1, we went to Copperbell Mines as Dark Knight, and turns out the scholar knew me. Hello! They also came into the stream a bit later to say hello to me. The run goes perfectly fine with no major surprises, although Dark Knight with barely any of its toolkit is a bit silly. For duty 2, we went to Ifrit Extreme as Monk. Overall, most of the team appears to know what to do in this fight. We do have minor issues resulting from sometimes destroying 3 nails at a time, but one major problem in this team is that both healers don't quite seem to understand what to do about Searing Wind, despite several players in the party explaining that they need to go away from the party. The scholars sometimes seem to get it, but not consistently. But after each wipe, the White Mage, who is also a mentor by the way, is way more focused on complaining about the party taking too much damage than actually listening to the advice we are trying to give them. The conversation, which of course you cannot see, typically went something to the effect of them complaining that we take too much damage and to be more careful with the nails, and then us explaining that the only reason why we're taking so much damage is because there's a healer in our midst, chunking all of us for 3000 damage each and knocking us around. And each time, they never respond to our concerns, but apparently expect us to listen to theirs. This kind of exchange happens after each of the 3 wipes we have here. Even on the final attempt, the best way I can describe it is that everyone else got skilled enough at dodging the healers for the party to mostly survive. With that said, you might be thinking, if the healers are forced to be in Narnia, how would they be capable of healing everyone from all the random AoE damage happening? Well, the first thing, which is probably somewhat obvious, is that a huge part of the damage is coming from the Searing Winds themselves. But the other part is that specifically White Mage and Scholar are the most capable healers of dealing with healing the party while they themselves are in Narnia. Cure 3, yes, Cure 3, is centered on your target instead of yourself, enabling you to AoE heal at range. For Scholar, you can place your pet more central to the raid to be able to apply Whispering Dawn, which, while not as impressive as Cure 3, still is pretty effective. Finally, for monk tips themselves, I've mentioned this before, but long story short, Perfect Balance is such a weak cooldown at level 50 that it doesn't really add any damage, and since it removes your form at the end, it comes at a slight loss too, which means, overall, no point in using it. Which is why I'm not using it. Now, at the end, we do beat it, but it felt more like a relief than a success due to this problem where our healers weren't particularly interested in trying to adjust in any way. For duty 3, we went to Bird Up as Reaper, and yeah, not much happening here. I guess one thing you could try is setting up Death's Design while waiting, but then again, since more mobs spawn in, it might just end up making the mobs die even less in sync, however much of a difference they make. As usual, we clear the first set, wait for respawns, and kill everything again. Quick and easy. For duty 4, we went to Tam-tara Deepcroft as Scholar, and we actually have 3 classes in the group. Interesting. However, the tank is pulling big, so things are going reasonably fast. Although, neither Lancer nor Arcanist has any AoE at this level, so it's all Marauder overpower. Speeding through the duty, we finish it all in under 10 minutes. For duty 5, we went to Backstreet's Back as Machinist. I guess it is worth mentioning that it was at this point we decided to also remove jobs from the Wheel of Jobs as they got picked out, removing the chance for repeats. Which of course makes it even sadder in a way when I get an exciting job but then land in a duty where the most exciting thing is off limits. Oh, also the tank in this group was Ham from my raid team. Hello! In this duty, as Machinist, the best you can do pretty much boils down to spread shot spam. even with the 7.2 nerfs. For duty 6, we went to chucking branches and receiving references as Viper, and our healer is Agent Monica of the community. Hello! In a duty like this, the key things a Viper can optimize around is making sure both buffs are active, and after that point, since the step 1s and 2s are equally powerful, you only need to worry about doing the step 2s to refresh buffs. On the other hand, if there are 3 targets at this level, Steal More is barely stronger than the single target options, and outright worth just spamming on its own on 4 more targets. But on precisely 3 targets, alternating Steal More and Reaving Fangs is actually the most effective potency per second, assuming of course your single target attack goes on something particularly healthy, like a barricade for instance. For duty 7, we went to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as Bard. In this run, I decided to not apply dots to the turtle even if it would make getting it to half HP a little bit faster. In hindsight, I'm actually not sure why. It wouldn't endanger the turtle much, all things considered. As long as the party stops attacking eventually, it shouldn't make any difference. Once again, quick and easy run. For duty 8, we went to Under the Weight of Buckman as Black Mage. Fire, Thunder, and Fire 1 spam. Knowing what I know of this fight, there's really no reason to reapply Thunder after that, so if MP runs out, transpose, Blizzard. For duty 9, we went to One Brings Shadow, One Brings a Claw as Pictomancer. Now, for all the Pictomancers at max level, it might be a lot less obvious, but Pictomancer also got slapped at low level. The filler combo averages 300 potency per GCD, or 120 potency per second. Living Muse on its own is 400 potency, but takes 4 seconds to set up, leading to 100 potency per second. See the problem? Every second Living Muse, as usual, leads to a Morgue of the Ages, which makes every second Living Muse 225 potency per second, leading to an average of 162.5 potency per second. But that's sort of moot unless you reach the second one. This does indeed lead to a point in the fight where I don't bother to draw up my third Living Muse, since 1, 2, 3s would actually be better. Indeed, this kind of situation is also present at max level, but you know it's dire when Living Muse is competing with genuinely straight up just basic fire in red on its own. For duty 10, we went to Holminster Switch as Warrior, and throughout this duty, we have a bit of a conversation about expectations. Given how I tend to bring up even minor mistakes I randomly observe in my groups in these videos, you might sometimes get the impression that I'm expecting everyone to be perfect. This is not the case, and is more a matter of either pointing out the elephant in the room, if I don't mention it, someone else probably will, or to give you a lesson to learn from whatever mistakes these wonderful strangers make, so that you can be even better. Now, how is that relevant to this duty? Well, our healer is attacking, frequently too, but they do spend a lot more time casting healing spells than should be necessary. There are other options, and no need to overheal a warrior. However, they are attacking and taking chances here and there, and more importantly, speaking from my own recent experience with warriors and dungeons as a healer, it's probably better to be a bit ahead on it, because if the warrior fails to do their part, it is going to be rough to recover from. This healer does not know me, so they don't know how I plan to do this. And while I advise to try and play around your tanks as a healer, being able to do so requires that you're skilled enough as a healer to have an eye on what your tank is doing, while also doing what you're doing. So taking the middle ground and being a bit more front-loaded with the healing and then attacking when you're sure it is safe is good enough for me. I would much rather have a slightly too careful healer than one that throws all caution to the winds. Besides, the duty went reasonably fast, even with that in mind. For duty 11, we went to Titan Extreme as Summoner, and before we even pull once, one of our tanks disconnect. We decide to wait out the timer to kick them to get a replacement, which is probably for the best as the one tank we had left appeared to be a first timer, possibly. Our very fast replacement was Ilana, straight out of the stream chat, and they take the lead tanking, allowing us to clear the duty in the first pull, even though things did get a bit spicy here and there, including 2 jails spawning too close to each other, and a tank and a healer going down at the same time. For duty 12, we went to Castrum Meridianum as Gunbreaker, and in this group, we straight up have a cure bot. Like, no really, look at this. Remember what I was talking about back in Holminster Switch? Yeah, this is what I mean. Sure, we will definitely beat the duty in an alright time regardless, but man! I think the one saving grace is that as we went through the duty, people in the chat tried to determine what gear they had, and it seemed like it could definitely be legitimate level 50 equipment of sorts, making it a lot more excusable. But still, level 50 and not even trying to sneak in an attack. It just makes me sad and disappointed is what it does. For duty 13, we went to Origenics as Red Mage, and this dungeon has a tendency to take longer than the average dungeon thanks to the enforced pull restrictions here and there. That said, the run went well as expected. On the turtle, I had some fun with sleeping the turtle on every AoE it attempted to do. Fun fact, Red Mage can instacast sleep with dual cast. When you think about it, a quite obvious trick, but something that is often overlooked simply because, well, when would you use sleep? Here, of course. For duty 14, we went to Arf as White Mage, and a strange thing about the tank in this run is that they use Dark Mind very often, but not much of any of their other cooldowns. A Rampart here and there maybe, and one arm's length super early, but Dark Mind got used very frequently. Think about it, it wasn't like we needed more defensives than that really for the most part, but it would have been nice if we had them. On my end, as Afflatus Misery is not available at this level, the only benefit to using Afflatus Solace over any other healing spell is that it is instant and free. So if that doesn't matter and I get more raw healing out of Regen than a Cure 2, then the lilies stay on the bench. For duty 15, we went to Poking the Black Bear as Samurai. The main optimizations you can do as Samurai here is set up Higanbana with the damage buff active, then get the speed buff running and then simply AoE everything, I believe. The fight should be over fast enough that a reapplication of Higanbana is unlikely to be worth the effort, even if Higanbana overtakes Gecko within only a few ticks. Remember, the fight isn't over until all the enemies are dead. The flames though, those you can ignore. For duty 16, we went to 1000 Maws of Toto-Rak as Astrologian, and the group is solid so we rushed through everything. Even more so because both of our DPS also had AoE options, but because of my level, no cards for me. Not that I needed them, for the most part Essential Dignity was plenty powerful already, and the few heals I had to do on top of that was all well worth it to maximize our AoE damage. With our pace, we finished the dungeon in just under 7 minutes. Turbo! And finally for duty 17, we went to Stone Vigil as Paladin. I mentioned Cardia and we're off to the races, or so I thought. I pulled 3 packs, which I usually find manageable in this dungeon, and we wipe as our Sage lags a bit behind. I then offered to pull less, and well, this kinda stays true for the rest of the dungeon. On AoE packs, broadly speaking, it seems like our Sage prefers to just spam Diagnosis. Maybe an Euphrasian one if they're feeling spicy. On bosses, they will attack a bit, but that seemed to be it. I will say, it is perfectly possible they were new to the job, and were forgetting a lot of their tools as a result. Another thing to consider is that it's not like Sage has Dyscrasia or Driucholi at this level. Stone Vigil is a really awkward level to be a healer, because you're just shy of getting some of the most helpful tools as a barrier healer at the very least. However, Soteria, Phlegma, and Physis didn't seem to be used either, nor was Euphrasian Doses brought out on bosses much. Like, I'm just saying that a lot of options were left on the table. These observations also led me down a bit of a related but different topic, which was the funny observation that in most hobbies in life that involve other people, if you aren't bringing it, not doing your part, people will get annoyed and mad with you, or even tell you to leave. Like, if you aren't actually interested in participating, why are you here? But in gaming, Final Fantasy XIV included, it is surprisingly often that we will run into individual players that just can't be bothered to bring it. By surprisingly often, I mean, it should be exceedingly rare, right? And for the most part, if the duty is beatable with such a player, we usually will make our way through it. One reasoning as to why this can be is also because sometimes the players that don't really seem to bring it might be much less experienced or may have a good reason why they aren't that strong. And the more considerate player will recognize that they can't possibly know their story without asking. Case in point, when I was doing this duty, I was initially thinking that our Sage was intentionally being lethargic and doing the bare minimum. But since then, I've given it a lot of thought, and it is perfectly possible that they were new to the job and didn't quite have the overview they needed. They might have a long journey ahead of them in Mastery, and hopefully they will get there. That said, although the duty didn't go super fast, we did manage to clear in a reasonable time frame. One of the most concentrated sets so far. I imagine in some parts that I managed to get more done due to swapping roles a lot, meaning I was tapping into different categories that needed people here and there. Another part is of course also that since I was live, much less space for me to get distracted with other things in between duties. Now, I am curious if you liked the live format, if you were there to see it, otherwise link to the VOD in the description, and whether you found this set of Mentor Roulettes more interesting and varied than the quote-unquote usual. I felt it would be weird if I didn't include this in the series, as otherwise it would suddenly be a 17 duty bump with no explanation unless you watched the stream. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, at some point in Endwalker, a ton of AoE support actions got their radius massively increased. This included Physis 2 that sports an astounding 30 yalm radius. However, this buff was not applied to Physis 1, which still has the old 15 yalm radius.